Welcome back. You're watching Morning Prime. In case you're just joining us, good morning. I hope you had a restful evening and you're ready to kickstart your day in style. As usual, trust KTN News to inform you about the latest news making headlines. And in earnest, we're evaluating the day's top stories, what you can expect in today's edition of the local dailies. We've just evaluated one of the top stories encompassed on the front page of the Daily Nation right before the break, all to do with bishops faulting Ruto on taxes and state jobs. The voice of reason adding their voice to the current discourse, touching on the Finance Bill 2023, but equally faulting the president in terms of state appointments. And we just want to take a look at one of the stories that has been covered on the Standard, touching on state appointments. And we have an analysis done right there. I think it's page 7 of the Standard. You'll just see it on your screen shortly. There you have it. State jobs skewed to favor majority tribes, where they've taken a look at the ethnic composition of employees in parastatal and government offices. And according to what has been gathered so far, 21% from the Kalenjin community, 21% from the Kikuyu community as well. And it sort of points to ethnic bias in one way or the other. The ethnic composition is skewed. And this is not news or new news, if I can use that word, because the public service has been characterized in such a way over the years, highly influenced by politics in terms of these appointments. And perhaps just to go into some of the details briefly before we cross over to the panelists, an analysis of 97 key appointments by President William Ruto since he took the reins show just 2 communities have maintained that pattern of top state jobs, where he's appointed 24 cabinet secretaries, 6 judges, 51 PSs, 50 chief administrative secretaries, and also named more than 60 individuals as board directors and parastatal chiefs. And out of that, the Kikuyu and Kalenjin community tie at 21%. Somalis, Luyas, and Luo follow in the number of appointments at 12%, 10%, and 8% respectively. So, gentlemen, I'd like your take on this, because many argue that including minority communities and having proper representation of them in government sort of influences positively when you go to policy, when you take a look at trust, public trust perhaps, in these institutions. So briefly, gentlemen, and I'll start with you, Exen Iraqi, what's your take on the nature of appointments when it comes to, state parastatals?
I thought you should start with soon to be bishop. I like this data, but I am always very uncomfortable. The way in this country we have developed a habit of seeing everything through tribal lenses. I know that was borrowed from Nigeria, where they talk about the federal character. And one of the questions I always ask is, you give these statistics on tribes that have got jobs, but you also need to give us statistics on their level of qualification. Because to me, I would always take skills above tribe. Because if we have, for example, a vacant job today, at least somebody who has very rare skills, should we sacrifice that person because he comes from a certain tribe? Number 2, which worries me most, if a government job is being advertised today, should they specify people from certain tribes should not apply because they are overrepresented? Because when I went to school, the issue of tribe was never brought up. I was told do very well, be very obedient, fanya kazi kwa nguvu, pass in your exams. Then when I now get the qualification, I'm told, wait a minute, your tribe also matters. So I think I am not advocating that tribe should be, that there should be imbalance in public sector jobs. I'm okay with it. There should be balance, but a tribe should not be the most dominant thing. Okay. I also want to see the skills of those people, to see whether they are skilled enough to get those posts. Number 2, I believe that diversity is good. I have no question about it. The more diverse a workforce it is, the more innovative it's supposed to be, the more creative it's supposed to be, and the chances that our good ideas will be allowed to work. And I have two examples. 30 years ago, we had two countries that were superpowers, US and Russia, called Soviet Union. US has remained a superpower. And one of the reasons why US has done so well is because they are able to absorb diversity. From wherever you come in the world, we absorb you because of your skills, not because of your tribe. So we need to start learning how to embrace diversity.
You're not equating diversity with ethnic.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about that. Number two is Nairobi. Nairobi contributes about a quarter of the country's GDP, but has 7% of the population. And one of the things that makes Nairobi so vibrant is because of diversity. Nobody cares whether you are Kikuyu, whether you are Kalenjin, but can you bring some skills? Can you do something for this country? So I want us to move away from tribalism and probably focus more on skills and what you can do for this country.
Let me bring in the technical part of it, because if you keep discussing, it's fundamentally flawed. And they look at there, the first graph there, population distribution of major ethnic groups. That's the driver. And I probably, XN, with all respect, you understand that. This is what we call simple arithmetic mean. Simple arithmetic mean. It's something always called weighted mean. So if you look at that graph, yeah, and this is a question I've always said with my students. You even say that there are more, and Margaret Kobia was taken to National Assembly, there are more Kikuyus in public service. And one of the parliamentarians said, but in terms of population, in other words, we have a lot of people here, all ethnic groups. If I throw a stone, what's the probability to hit a Kikuyu? It's probably higher than to hit a Somali. That's simple and straightforward. So if you look at the first table there, look at the growth in terms up from 1979 to 2019. You can see, and I'm not talking because I come from there. I'm looking at the numbers.
Simple.
I think that should be very clear. Yeah. You notice that there are more in terms of the Kikuyus, followed by the Luyas, right? Yeah. And the green there is what? The Kamba. Yeah. Very interesting. Now, yeah, this gives you, it's the same thing we say in the US, familiar. In the US, you can win through, you cannot get the president through the popular vote. They go to what, Iraqi? They go to
colleges.
Colleges?
Yes.
They go to colleges. California will get more colleges because of the population. New York will get that. Mississippi, where my brother and I went, will get like a low Cairo because of the population. So if you look at that graph, it can now tell you in terms of how many you expect because of the numbers we hear. And the same as the growers thrown, we'll probably get into that perspective. So if you actually superimpose that graph and the one of talking about President Moise and the one of President Kenyatta there and the one perhaps of Ruto, it'll tell you the picture. It should tell us the picture. And I think the one for, if you notice the two in the one which the bishops are saying, you see that in that graph there are more Kalenjins, there are more Kikuyus in that, and there's more Kenya Somali, and also the Kaba kicks in. Now look at the population and relate to that. And that should give you, on top of what XN is saying, and I really appreciate, one thing I really interested in the qualification. You show up, Jesse, my friend shows up, you are ready, a man, and you have the papers, and you are go on. It doesn't matter where you come from. And that brings what you bring, the diversity. But more importantly, we should go back, just the praying numbers. And 2005, there was a lady, Margaret Gashara. And Margaret Gashara was employed by the National AIDS Council as the first CEO. And she was earning almost 1 point something, 2005. While everybody was in 200s. And she said, no, this organization is, the salary is balanced. And XN, if you come in, you know, she just gone there and said, if I arrange this in terms of the highest to the lowest, and I get the mid-row using the median, everybody is like in 200,000. But if you went there and started bringing something like a mean, you'd have actually see it. So we need to go beyond what is there. And I think that unpacking to me, and maybe to spice it, if you go to the mortuary today, you're probably more Kikuyus than anybody else. If you go to committee, there are more, perhaps.
Okay.
And therefore, that has to be put into perspective. That would be my take in it. But it's a very interesting thing that when you're doing all this, I think the fundamental is the qualifications. To me, that should be the drive forward.
But we do see that in political appointments, where meritocracy takes, takes precedence compared to perhaps political allegiance. Well, that's a question for another day.
But still, you can go to that political allegiance, and I bet get good skills like Jesse or XN or whoever. So my understanding is you are not restricted of the set. You can get the qualification you want if you want to please the support, and that's okay, because when you're in the campaign, there are people who are diehards with you. There are people who buy your idea. There are people who sit down and support, and I can mention somebody like David D. He played a very big role, in my understanding, with coming with the Kenya Kwanza Manifesto, and he's a very interesting man. He wanted to be hands-on, and he said, "Let me be hands-on," and that is now. You get people who have the understanding what need to be done.
Okay.
For once, I am agreeing with Prof. and disagreeing with another Prof.
I know. Even if I told you I'm Iraqi, you still disagree.
No. For me, the issue that the bishops have raised just shows the underbelly of our society around the whole question of inequality. And when Barack Obama was here some years back, when he was president, he had mentioned something which makes a very strong point, that a child is more likely to drop out of school in Western or Nyanza than in Central. If I can just use the former provinces' names. And the fact that the poverty levels in some of those areas is higher than in other areas. What he is alluding to, that we should not look at the tribes, we should only look at merit, is academic. And it is academic because you cannot tell me that there are only qualified people from a certain community, and there are only qualified people from this other community, and the rest of the country does not have qualified people. That is a lie, and it is a fallacy. For me, the whole issue is government is about jobs, and it is about tenders, if I can be crude about it, and say that if then the government is for all of us, and we are all paying taxes, and if I can go to my village, can I still get water? Can I still get electricity? Can I still have access to some facilities that I am able to access in Nairobi, like hospitals? And the truth of the matter is, this is not the case in many of the places we come from. But you go to Kwakina Wainaina hapa Kiambu, my friend, there are roads even kwa shamba. Roads even to his grandmother's place. Me, you can come to my place, and there are some friends who came from the University of Nairobi some time back, where after we had graduated, and they told me, Ramogi tumeenda kweko mpaka barabara kaisha. The road literally ended. And I think that is something that we need to look at. Even though then that there is the whole point of the weighted average, which is, yes, it is true. There are more Kikuyus than there are Luos, Luyas, or any other tribe. The Kalenjin population is also high. But we also need to appreciate the fact that some of these census reports have been contested in the past, because the person in power has a way of revising the census in their favor, so that then a narrative is pushed in line with the census. Because I remember leaders from Northeastern complaining about the census. I remember leaders from Western complaining about the census. And so we should take those population figures with a pinch of salt. But primarily, we need to address the whole issue of inequality. Why is it that the two most ludicrous or contested or difficult preachers are in Kilifi? And that tells you that there is a certain poverty level there that allows for them to thrive in such an environment. And it's not just Kilifi, it's Kilifi, it's Tana River. If you went into Tana River, I think more work still needs to be done to ensure that we bring the whole country around the table. And we need to discuss about this distribution. The problem started, and I'm finishing now. The problem started with the, what did you call it, the sessional paper number 10 of 1969, where we identified areas of production.
65.
65, thank
65.
you. And we identified... yes.
The author, yeah.
We identified areas of production and said then resources should be targeted in these areas and neglected other areas where, in fact, there are areas that we neglected that have very good capacity for production that are not being, there is near zero investment. Right. So for me, the bishops are saying there is inequality. They may have said it in a way that is easy to communicate, which is the appointments, but the bishops are saying there is inequality and we need to address that.
Can I rebut?
Sure.
Because I'm really finding my neighbor here being very, very observant about why the region is doing so well along the coast, which is predominantly, Christianity is doing very well along the coast, which is predominantly Muslim.
Not Christianity, wrong Christianity.
Or whatever it is. That's an interesting observation. But I think I still advocate meritocracy, because a girl in Madeira and a girl in Homabay and a boy in Turkana sit for the same example. So very early in life, we are taught about meritocracy. You know, you tell me that somebody in Turkana will not have the same facilities as somebody from Githunguri. But if we can equalize those facilities so that they have equal access to education and facilities, then later on we don't need to worry about where you come from. Absolutely. And I agree with you, we need to focus more on that inequality. But there's another point we are missing here which is very important. If you look at the number of civil servants in this country, soldiers, policemen, people in the counties, it's only about 800,000 Kenyans. So majority of the people in this country don't work for the government. They work for the private sector, the informal sector. So it is unfair to focus so much on 800,000 people when 52, 53 million people are not in that sector. So what we should be asking is, what about the rest of the Kenyans? Where are they getting jobs from? So while I agree with you that these appointments are important and they should be equal and there should be equality and there should be everybody should have an equal chance to get these big jobs. I think we should also not forget that most jobs are elsewhere, not in the public sector. Finally, I want to tell you with uncertain terms that there are certain parts of central Kenya that have no roads, that have no power. So this myth that has been created that people from certain parts of the region have all the facilities, including a road to their grandmother's house, is not true.
No, him, kwa grandmother yake kuna barabara. Do you see him contesting?
No, but I know there are parts of central Kenya.
Because my
where there are no roads.
Are we enhancing productivity, or we are busy discussing who is who? That's the bottom line.
Yeah, let me come back to the issue of the
finalize on this. Yeah?
Yes. He's mentioned the private sector, and in a small economy like ours, he knows that the public sector influences the private sector. If I list for him who owns banks in this country, he knows that, the list would probably start sounding like Githunguri and Muranga. Githunguri,
no wonder you're not sitting next to each other.
Now, allow me to use this example now that he's here and he will not beat me. Githunguri and Muranga. And so then, if you have access to a bank, it means then there is access to credit facilities. Access to credit facilities mean then there's access to capacity to produce for production. Production leads to employment, and more employment, savings, more production. And so then access to government gives you capacity to create a robust private sector.
It should not be the same.
Which
should not be that way.
It should not be that way, but it is that way,
yes,
as of now.
Yes.
And so because of that, then even the private sector is more skewed in that direction. So that you find banks in that direction, even manufacturers,
hawkers,
and they have capacity to tell the minister, chase out the Chinese, while us fishermen, we don't. and it's everyone around that because of access to credit.
Right.
And the worst part, as I finish, is the whole issue of credit. They even did a research and said some people can pay loans better than some people. And when we say people, we don't mean individuals, we mean tribes. There was someone who sat down and said they commissioned a research to see that this tribe should not be given loans so easily because they don't pay as opposed to this tribe. Okay. I think that now is what now is driving the inequality even in the private sector.
So that should be the debate we should be having. How do we reduce that inequality? So that when somebody is given a big job in the government, you don't bother because you have something else to do. You have another job somewhere. You have choices. But now the reason why people are looking for those big jobs is they believe that if Ramogi or the Yambo gets a big job, you can give me a smaller job, your assistant, and so on.
I think, gentlemen, it's so sad. We sit here and we start talking about you can't get a loan from because you are this, from there, from there. I think there are more fundamental issues to do. It's the same narrative. They were saying you go to the bank there because you are Jesse and from here, they gives you money. A lot of rubbish, probably put it that way. I think we need to be more, at the end of the day, if we can be more in terms of looking for skills which can move this country forward, we will benefit.
You got my point.
That's the point. Let's look for skills. It doesn't matter whether that comes from Mijikeda or it comes from Jesse, who doesn't have any ethnic name. Jesse
or ethnic look.
The moment we reach there, and the question is asked, if the president is from your ethnic group, how do you benefit as an individual leader?
Do you want me to list for you, or
no,
you asking?
I don't want to get into that discussion because it's not here nor there.
It's actually here and there, and that's why I was offering to list.
Yes, it's more your effort. The problem is some of us who are where we are because of our own efforts understand that more than somebody who has been held.
Just say I'm banning.
And we have to finalize on this. Other matters to talk about.
I'm banning. At least allow me to respond to this. Prof, with all due respect and humility, I think that is Kikuyu privilege speaking. You have not appreciated the fact that there are areas with inequality. And so you can afford to say that it is our efforts. You can afford to say that the presidency does not affect communities and where they are. You can afford to say that just let's concentrate on skills. And we know guys with skills who have not accessed jobs for years because apparently it's not as easy as you are alluding to. So what you're saying is all good, but it is academic. The truth of the matter is there are inequalities. And these inequalities are driven by the political class with some of the appointments that the bishops are complaining about. And so if we can be honest with each other and say that the whole country needs to be brought to the table, and then we can discuss skills, but after we have appreciated the whole issue of access to jobs and opportunities. I rest my case.
Okay, gentlemen, could we agree to disagree on that particular point?
We can discuss with him over a cup of tea.
Sure. Who's buying?
I'll be a sponsor.
Okay, interesting. So let's talk about, even as we sort of ease our way into the Finance Bill 2023, a story on the Daily Nation on broke NHIF heart patients as hospitals decline cards. Sort of touches on some of the deductions that have been proposed going forward. So let's talk about this, because, I mean, according to some of the hospitals that were that gave information. They said that patients, especially those who are in chronic illnesses, have been turned away from hospitals. Most of them depend on NHIF. And the voice from the hospitals, the private hospitals, is that if you owe me almost 10 million shillings and you're paying me 1 million, how do you honestly expect me to run the day-to-day finances of the hospitals? That's the voice of the hospital managers. But at the end of the day, Kenyans have an expectation. Universal healthcare, NHIF should cover certain issues when it comes to providing healthcare. Yet that's not the case. Are we getting, what are we getting wrong from the get-go, even as we take a look at the proposals around deductions to do with NHIF and NSSF? Briefly.
I can start because he is afraid. One of the big pushes under the President Uhuru Kenyatta was about the universal health care. And I believe that is a project the new government should focus on. And the easiest way to do it...
One of their pillars.
Yes, one of the easiest ways to do it is through National Health Insurance Fund, which is existing, which I'm sure all of us pay into. So when I go to a hospital and I'm told I cannot be admitted because, I don't know, NHIF does not pay hospitals. As a patient, my work is to pay 500 that I'm supposed to for the lower income. Once I pay that, the rest is not my business. So I think the big issue we are seeing here is actually mismanagement. Because why should people pay into NHIF and not get the services? Where does that money go? So we need to be told exactly where the money that people pay into NHIF go and why that money is not paid to hospitals. Right. Bishop Oresapiti says I think faith-based health institutions are owed about 2 billion. That's a lot of money. So that money that we pay, we should go where we know where it goes, and we should know who is responsible. So that when I pay my 500 per month, I'm assured of health services, whether I'm poor, whether I'm rich. And I should be a healthy person because the more healthy we are, the more productive we become. I haven't worked in the health sector, but one of the big things that has worried me about the health sector is the cost. It's very costly. I took a patient to hospital last week. And when I look at the bill, a very simple surgery, just at the neck here. When I look at the bill, I was shocked. And one of the things that I appreciated through that bill is I wondered what ordinary Kenyans go through to take care of their health. So when I hear that the small 500 you don't pay is not taking care of your health, I get very disturbed as a Kenyan.
So what makes this whole thing unsustainable from where you sit, Prof, briefly?
If you look at health, and fundamentally health is a key ingredient for any country to move forward in terms of the issue narrative that it provides opportunity for people to be productive. A sick person, you understand, blah, 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 blah. And health, through the Constitution 2010, is devolved. It was actually fully devolved by the understanding of the importance we want to take services to the Mwananchi in terms of health services. And the Jubilee government, even stepping back, look at the Vision 2030. It was a key sector within the social pillar, health. Then the Jubilee government fast-tracked it by having universal health care. The Kenya Kwanza Manifesto has also fast-tracked it, appreciating the importance of it. And the understanding which I have that the kind of contribution we do will probably not meet the expenses you incur, because if you look at that whole sector is hyped, and you look at the drugs, you look where they're coming from, the group of fund concentrating on that. It's a whole spectrum where the developed economies really, they walk through the park, the kind of machinery, the drugs. And therefore, if you go to a private school, a private hospital, they'll charge you a lot in it. If you go to public, and I've always advocated, and one student working on that, Cuba has one of the best public health services in the world. That's why you got the doctors here. And you notice they never stayed in Nairobi. They went to the counties. And Al-Shabaab took the advantage. I think they took some. The whole idea is the frontline in terms of preventive health. And probably need to focus on that. Now, my thinking tells me is perhaps the kind of money we contribute towards that is not good enough. But it can be done in a differentiated way. The way, and this is something we have been talking of over years, of higher education loans board, that it's based, and you can really do a discriminate approach to it. If you are an orphan, if you are coming from a poor family, if you have no parents, you are very different from a single parent, kind of. And you can actually really support based on that differentiated support. The same. If a worker, you're telling them to increase from 200 to 500, who probably walks to get their daily living, that would be difficult. But there are people up there who can even pay 10,000. And goes to this kitty, which now supports the others. And my understanding here is it's something we can increase. And I hope Kamau, Engineer Kamau, in his experience over the years, this is something he can address head on in terms of really looking. Is it in the health or NSSF? Kamau. I think it's health where he is the chair of it. So there's need to increase how much we contribute a month, but in a differentiated manner, such that if Wainaina is earning more than Jesse, I could be paying more. The difficulty you're having is that you go to the counties, you go to the public, or you go to the missionary hospitals, they own a lot of money, and they can't. There's no way they can meet that. And therefore, going to the private sector, the first thing I want to do is say, I will not treat you. And I take cue of what XN is saying. It's actually very expensive for health. And I'm not quite sure whether we actually understand what health means. And one thing I play every day, not necessarily going to church, I play one day every day, is good health. Steve Jobs, and probably made it very clear, with all this wealth they have, and he was a billionaire by all standards, very brilliant man. When he was sick through cancer, with all my money, I cannot pay Jesse to come and sleep on this bed. So it's important that as a nation, we appreciate the core of that and take health. My favorite line, perhaps the best medicine we need to address as a nation is food. If we can address food, nutritious food, SDG 2, government Kenya Kwanza Jubilee, we will probably address a lot of issues with health issues in this country.
Yeah, I wish I had spoken before the professors, because now they've spoken most of my points.
We give you a chance, you refused.
But we're playing.
We give you a chance, you refused.
He started this
He
time.
says, I'm reading his notes.
Yes, I think generally they have mentioned the key issues here. One is the whole question of cost of medical attention in this country. I think it's just too high. And we need to really rethink that. If we are going to have success at universal health services, then we need to start by asking ourselves, how can we lower the cost of access to medical services? But the second question is the whole issue of NHIF and how it's structured. You see, the very wealthy, or should I say higher ups in government, still depend on NHIF for their medical attention. And so you find that someone higher up can go for medication in Germany, and NHIF is supposed to pay for that medication. But their messenger in the same office is contributing with them the same amount, but cannot access even Nairobi Hospital. And so that also needs to be addressed, so that then what he has mentioned, which is differentiation, is a reality, so that if you earn less, you pay less. If you earn more, pay more. But then again, there is the whole question of, do they have sufficient resources to take care of all the requests that come across the country? And it is evident that that is no longer the case. Whether the resources, I haven't looked at their books, so I don't know whether those resources were actually received and misused, or in fact, the one that was received was less than satisfactory.
Okay, interesting.
Can I add something
Finally,
here?
yeah.
This is an interesting debate for a very simple reason. The government has been proposing to reduce contribution of NHIF from 500 to 300. And education and health have something in common. People believe that they should pay less. And I think it's the time we sat down and asked, what's the true cost of getting medical service? What's the true cost of getting good education? So that we give them the true costing. I agree with him that maybe one reason why NHIF is having a problem, although there might be mismanagement, is that the money we contribute is not good enough. I saw somebody to tell me that I'm privileged, that's why I'm saying that it's too low. It's true that maybe because I have money. But it's not a question of having money. It is looking at the true cost of doing things. Let me take you back to this bill that I got last week. I was surprised that I was being charged 200 shillings to change the linen. So if a patient is staying overnight, the beddings will be changed the next day, and you are charged 200. So when we talk about the cost of education, the cost of medical services, do we get the true cost?
That was a private facility?
Yes, it was a semi-private facility, because it was a private facility in a public facility. But I think we need to get the true cost of education, the true cost of health. One problem, and the Prof will agree with me, is that we have never understood what is capitalism. You cannot get services without somebody paying for them, even if it's a taxpayer. So let's get the true cost of NHIF, the true cost of education. We pay, then we worry about the supply. If you remember when David D asked a very simple question, do you want shortage of power or do you want high power? And maybe you should ask the same question in health and in education. Because why should I have an impression that I'm paying for NHIF and I'm not getting services? I would rather pay 700, but be assured of those services instead of paying 300 and not getting services. Let's be truthful.
I cannot speak for power, but surely health.
Yeah.
I think we have some models that are working. You look at...
Are you agreeing or disagreeing with me?
I will not be boxed, Prof. You look at the model that the Indians have. I think one, yes, they have large numbers. There are many.
Economies of scale.
So there is the economies of scale. But still, their cost of medical services is quite low compared to ours. Yet it is very, very good. Almost the same as ours, or even better in many instances. And so then you ask yourself, why can't we have something similar? And I think that was now the bigger question. So yes, we can still have cheaper health and good health at the same time. As for these electricity costs, I don't want to comment on that.
You can send him to him. They seem to be friends.
Yes, he's been doing thumbs up to his friends, Dr. Engineer Kamau and David.
Yeah, well, yeah, the chair is Engineer Kamau. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
I equally
it's
confirm
Engineer Kamau,
NHIF.
yes.
Yeah.
No, they are good people.
Okay.
If you see them, you get a lot of sense.
I am willing to have coffee with them and share with them.
And
I will
then
not
there's something
be there.
that Ndee tweeted this week, perhaps touching on the aspect of government wasting. I think he was hinting, and this is not verbatim, he was hinting to the fact that, if you clamp down on government spending,
Right.
the economy will equally suffer. And he gave a case in example. If we take this government meetings to, government-owned institutions apart from hotels, the hotels, perhaps the bars, in extension, will suffer as well. What do you make of such a controversial tweet from an economic advisor?
I have an analogy before the profs speak, because when they speak, they'll take all the points.
Can you Jesse Arawas, or questions that you ask?
Yes.
You always give.
We start with him. Okay, he's complained. Huh?
Yeah, he has complained.
Okay, go ahead, Rabobi.
No. Of course, money has been poured. Prof has met my political enemies.
I remember.
I think the whole question is around austerity. And Ndee was being told, can't you guys actually apply austerity? And austerity has a way of constricting the economy, because government expenditure has a way of spurring economic activity. And so what Ndee is essentially saying is, I think after that, there was also another tweet of taxes, around taxes. Sure. And the best analogy is you have a business, you are running a business. And for some reason or another, you have revenue, but half of your revenue is going towards paying taxes, paying loans. You have some good big loans with banks. So you have three options. Option one is you stop spending, you stop buying stock. Now, if you stop buying stock, it means then that you will not have revenue. So in essence, your income, even the one now you are thinking is small, will no longer be there. Okay. So that's the austerity. Option two is you pass on the cost of the loan to the clients. And so you have the clients now suffer the consequences of your decisions, which is in fact what we are seeing. It's been passed on as taxes. Option three is you go and negotiate with the persons who gave you loans. The challenge of, privately you can do that, but the challenge, and you can consolidate your loan nicely and maybe extend the term. The challenge of a public economy or a public economic unit like now the country of Kenya is when you do that, the lender will tell everybody else that imagine Kenya is unable to pay me, they are broke. And when they do that, it means tomorrow you cannot lend, you cannot borrow again. And as a public institution or a public financial unit, you want to be able to borrow because governments thrive on borrowing. They survive on borrowing. And so when you are now unable to borrow because someone in China has told everybody else around the globe Kenya is unable to pay, you don't want that. So Ndii is right in some instances, yes. If we go the austerity way, no income. If we go the debt restructuring way, no debt accessible to us. So somehow they are forced to come back to you and me and tell us, pay taxes.
And it goes with what Exen mentioned earlier on. We don't want more borrowing, so what's the alternative? Paying taxes, yeah?
Magufuli did that when he came in Tanzania, and the public service were restricted in terms of doing meetings in hotels. And he went to that measures because it was really abused. And there is a lot of movement of resources when you do that, because there's a private sector, there are hotels, but there are cases where it's misused. When you find a team is really putting at areas where you're being charged like 20,000 a night a room, then you have difficulties. And you public sector, and I got to think about understanding the public sector when I was the other side of the development partners. And I go to this meeting in Jogo House, second floor, and the team says, no, we want to go to Lake Bogoria to do this work. And in a naive way, I asked, why can't you do it here in Jogo? You have a nice boardroom, whatever. They said, no. And the public service, you know them, they didn't say anything. But they never went there. So it's only when I went back to the office and talked to my colleagues who have been in job for a long time. I was just a greenhorn in then. And I was told, no. They get out there to supplement something else, but when they get out there, they get the work done. Interesting, because we eventually went to Bogoria. We would go for supper and work up to about 10. We get the work done. So there's a balancing. Which hotel are we going, right? Yeah. And that one helps. It's also given an opportunity to get out the station. So what we were at the point coming out in terms of government doing management of the revenue, the expenditure. How do you manage your expenditure? We are really not talking about the public service here. We are talking issues where we are going to spend this much with ABCD, we are going to spend this. And the question you ask, is that a priority really? I don't know whether you guys picked in the media yesterday, social media, a certain office had put a tether for meat, I don't know what, and I don't know what, and I don't know
seafood.
What.
Yes,
Seafood,
yes.
Yeah, so something like that. And then you ask yourself, okay, we are not doing very well. How do you do it? The question you are raising about the third option, whereby I negotiate with XN, I owe you 1,000 shillings, I'm not doing very well, can you reschedule, I'll pay you after 3 months. I'm not defaulting. And that's very important, I'm not defaulting. But I'm telling XN, right now as it is, I can. And when you look at the situation where you are in a situation, do I pay the public service or do I pay the debt? Now, when you don't pay the public service, one thing which kicks in very strongly, there's no circulation of money. I'll not meet Jaramogi at Kamaki's for me. And when I go to Kamaki's for me, somebody provide that good, somebody's roasting. So when you pay, and then even Kenya Revenue Authority, they don't get their return. So there's circulation. As opposed to where I say, I'm going to take this vis-a-vis this for the debt. And that's as a country we should. This is my strongest view. We need to renegotiate. We don't want to go the Ghana way. We don't want to go Zambia way. We don't want to go to Egypt way of really saying, I'm not going to pay. But I do. So the question is, like, take a very deliberate move as a nation. Sit down with the Chinese administration. Sit down with the Eurobond as it comes matures and say, as it is now, and something to appreciate. Really, we would actually conclude there was actually a recession, a mild one, the whole world. And that's something to appreciate. Because of these circumstances, the COVID was hit us, the issues of drought, the issues of the war. Can we renegotiate in terms of paying? You can even renegotiate, instead of paying 100 million, I'll pay you maybe 30 by spread over time. To me, that probably is a reasonable thing to do. Then really, when I'm a civil public service, have our own out there, the kids are going to school, blah, 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 blah. I think that's, to me, probably something good. Whether somebody says, well, Nene is not capable, I'm not capable because I've looked at my books and they are open. Really, I can't. So it's a question of really rescheduling. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for, than saying, I'm not paying.
Okay.
I'm benefiting from the conversation here. Because the original question you asked is, Dr. David D saying that waste will reduce economic growth. Because that what you call waste actually creates demand somewhere else. When, for example, somebody brings flowers to my office, I pay him, then he uses that money somewhere else. When somebody brings what you are calling seafood into my office or to a certain ministry, he is paid and the money flows. But the question we should be asking is, should we continue with status quo or we should be bold enough to change things? For example, if we reduce that waste through austerity, I know people are going to suffer. But I think in the wrong land, that money should be put into productive part of the economy. Correct. But what he is not sure and he is not sure is if that money will go to that productive sector of the economy. But I think there's no question about it. We need to fundamentally restructure our economy. For example, I've always wondered why I have never seen on the streets of Nairobi a GK Vitz. If he drives a Vitz, why can't the government drive Vitz? So I think there's, D and others are right in saying that we can reduce the waste. I know they'll be paid now, but they'll be against the wrong land. The question is whether politicians can convince the voters that you are going to suffer today, but tomorrow will be better. If they can convince us that, the better. Same with taxes. Everybody is saying we are going to pay taxes. I have no problem paying higher taxes. If you can convince me that in the wrong land, I'll get better services, there will be more jobs, there will be more productive, I have no problem with that. But as long as I'm not sure what will happen to that extra money that I'm not paying, people will always be reluctant, the bishops will talk, he will talk, and everybody will complain. So let's have a very long-term plan that this is the money we are going to raise, this is the waste we are going to reduce, this is where it is going, and this is the improvement in the economy.
Okay. I think the question you're asking, probably coming to what Hilaki is saying, yes, the flowers are coming to the office and somebody is benefiting, which is right. But the question you ask yourself, why did they need the flowers in the office? Yeah. In the circumstances I am in, do I need the seafood, as Jesse is putting out there? So, because those flowers, they can still be exported. Where you look at those economies, they have that luxury of going for those kind of goods. And the question we're asking ourselves, do I buy the flowers really, or I fix the healthcare? That's the choices we have to make. And I hope David would have gone and expanded what do we mean by waste, because that's the fundamental aspect of it. I might not go down to fix, and we had the same thing in the Passat, but they're saying this high-ed kind of gasless, is it possible to perhaps It's interesting, we were talking with somebody and I think that's why these guys fight for power. I think we were in Kenya School of Government, then I was chair there, and you saw the vehicles coming and taking off. I was like, that's why they fight to be this position. But the question you ask yourself, really, is it that hype I want? There was a guy, I think Paraguay or Uruguay, he used to have a VW.
It was in Paraguay, yeah.
Paraguay. And that economy did not collapse. The measures you take, if you improve, then you can go to it. And that's what I think we as Kenyans, we are really asking. In difficult times, we are seeing a certain level of unnecessary, what I would call luxury consumption, or conspicuous if you wish.
Those and Vebrim.
Yeah, over the weekend I was somewhere, and you look, the vehicles, fine, you have earned it as a Kenyan, you can drive it, but the question you need to ask, when you import a 45 million car, you're actually using our foreign currencies, right? Import it, but let's have taxes to really discourage it. And the elephant in the room, I probably want to say this, if I have to put it in. I was looking at some data from 1990, and you look at our exports and imports. From almost 1995, the exports were becoming lower and lower and lower than exports, and the deficits getting wider. My understanding, that's our biggest challenge in this country. How can we come in and start to jump past the exports? Because the moment we are dependent out there, it's even a security issue. Because if my food is all imported, then what happens if somebody says, nope? So we need to go back and look, how are we going to export more? Are exporting more, we have to go back. And the president will be very strong in that, productivity. I hope one of the things they agreed in Israel was how we are going to focus on agriculture. Israel was here, Gurana, didn't work. I hope that this time it will work. A friend of mine reminds me, hope is not a strategy.
Okay, I think it's time we talk about the Finance Bill 2023 extensively, because, and I implore upon you, gentlemen, despite being economists, let's try and break it down in a language that the common Mwananchi might understand, so that they know this is where the pinch will be heaviest. This is where the government has taken my plight into consideration. And as we do that, we have a couple of graphics which we would like to play just to paint a picture of what we're working with, especially when it comes to the 2023-2024 financial year, the budget proposals. We're working with 3.6 trillion in terms of the next financial year. And some of the proposals around the finance bill are indicated right there. Deposit of 20% of disputed tax to KRA ahead of settlement. I think this is when you're appealing a ruling that is not in your favor. You have to deposit 20%, 35% tax rate for income above 500,000 Kenya shillings per month. It's up from 30% tax on per diems, 3% contribution to finance affordable housing projects. This is definitely a controversial and emotive subject, bearing in mind it's not the first time we've seen it pop up. Increase the turnover tax from 1 to 3%, 15% withholding tax on digital content creators. Definitely a lot to talk about right there. And equally 15% duty on betting and alcohol products adverts. And beauty products are being raided in one way or the other. 5% duty on wigs and other beauty products. Some of the proposals...
Including the beards.
Yes, including fake beards.
Beards.
Yes,
Fake
they
beard.
put
No,
it that way.
Mine is real. Mine
Oh,
is real.
yeah. Thanks for clarifying. Do we have another board? There we go. Some of the proposals, I think we've gone through that. There we go. VAT increase on petroleum products from 8 to 16%. Yet another emotive subject which has a net effect. And it's not the first time we've seen this come up. Remember, the VAT Act 2013 was introduced, but Parliament put a transitional clause to defer implementation and the tax was eventually effected in 2018 at 8%. So now they're eyeing 16%. Will it go through? Only time will tell. But what are the implications? We'll find out. Import declaration fee down 2.5%. Good news right there. Exemption of exported services from VAT. Interesting. And VAT exemption on flour and sugarcane transportation. So some of the proposals that are touching on the Finance Bill 2023, and we just want to continue exploring them to find out what is in store for the Kenyan households. Okay, so that's the last board, and as we come back from the short break we're just taking right now, we'll solely focus on the Finance Bill 2023. A lot has been said. There's so much speculation, not just from the taxpayer. We've had lobbying from business organizations, from representatives of workers as well. So we'll try and dot the I's and cross the T's with my panelists of learned economists. And as we mentioned, we'll try and break it down in a language that you understand back at home. So stay with us. You're watching Morning Prime. We'll be back.